The escalation between the US and Iran this week put the ceasefire and the Memorandum of Understanding signed last month at risk. This is how events have unfolded. It began on Monday when the Revolutionary Guard struck 3 commercial vessels off the coast of Oman. The following day, the US said it carried out retaliatory strikes on Iranian military targets. Tehran responded with missile and drone attacks on US bases across the Gulf. On Wednesday, President Trump told reporters the ceasefire was over. His announcement rattled markets and oil prices increased. The Revolutionary Guard warned it would respond if the US continued its military intervention in the Strait of Hormuz. Although the fighting has paused, indirect nuclear talks between the US and Iran remain suspended. All right. Joining me now in the studio for more is Paul Musgrave, an Associate Professor of Government at Georgetown University in Qatar. Thank you for your time, Paul. The ceasefire is over, says Donald Trump. So what does that actually mean?
I think that what we have to look at is both sides are really trying to raise the pressure and test where each other's boundaries are. It's very easy to say the ceasefire has a definition, words mean things, but kinetic and diplomatic talks all exist on a spectrum. What we see now are both countries trying to say, here's what's really important to me, and here's why we need a deal. And that's why you see the threats ramping up. But the actual concrete actions being taken, like waiving the sanctions suspensions, but not actually going back to interdicting Iranian shipping, shows that there's still room to negotiate. So I think that this is a testy period, but this is not the end of negotiations by any means.
OK, a bit of flexing then of position.
Exactly.
And maybe some acceptance of one side's position by other parties around the world. Some international media now reporting that Europe is considering a proposal for some kind of tolling protocol in the Strait. Is this an indication we are now seeing a slow wave of acceptance of Iran's insistence that it will have a protocol and there will be some exchange of currency or money to cross that waterway?
Well, the current protocol being reported by The Guardian and other sources is that there's going to be some sort of a voluntary protocol matching what's being done in the Strait of Malacca between Singapore, Indonesia, and others. And I think that what's happening right now is that people are finally getting creative about how to square Tehran's really unacceptable provision for a mandatory system of tolls with the fact that you have to give Tehran something in order to recognize their clear ability to interdict what's happening. So making this a voluntary contribution, as has been done under international law elsewhere, that's a creative proposal that might allow it. Now, the question is that actually going to give Tehran what it wants, which is a stream of income? And if we basically set up something that looks like a Patreon for the Strait of Hormuz, is that really going to raise the amount that Tehran wants? On the other hand, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff have reportedly urged Tehran to think bigger and to look at the lifting of sanctions, to look at the resumption of trade, to look at that $300 billion fund that would allow for reconnecting Iran to the global economy. And frankly, that is a much better deal for the Iranians. So this is something,
Do you mean give up the control of the Strait in order to get all those other things being promised by the wider deal?
Give up the control of the Strait that would have mandatory tolls and instead find something that doesn't contradict Tehran's insistence, but also allows both sides to walk away claiming a victory, which is what everybody wants.
And still, efforts to allow both sides to walk away with a win continues. Qatari mediators now are going to Tehran. What do you think that they can, or at least will be hoping to achieve?
Well, I think that one of the things that they want to achieve is to get formal talks back online. There's been a lot of back and forth this weekend over the question of who exactly authorized the strikes on shipping, including a Saudi and a Qatari tanker. And that's been something that has been really distressing. American sources have leaked that this was perhaps done by hardliners not controlled by or forming only a part of the central government, and they want Tehran to say that publicly. I don't know if Tehran's going to agree to that, but certainly the Qataris and other mediators, including Pakistan, are going to want to make sure that talks continue. Everybody understands at the end of the day, as President Trump and Vice President Vance have said about Ukraine and Russia, there's going to have to be something that looks like a negotiated or at least accepted outcome at the end of this. The question is, how do you get there? And is the United States going to want to revert to full-scale, all-out war, the kind that President Trump has been threatening recently?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the allegations and accusations continue to fly. Israel has reportedly shared intelligence with the United States about Iranian plans to assassinate President Donald Trump. He has since posted on social media saying 1,000 missiles are locked and loaded and aimed at Iran, with thousands more to follow. He says that's if the Iranian government acts on its threats to assassinate or attempt to assassinate him. Trump went on to state that orders have already been given and the US military is ready to, for 1 year, subject to extension, completely decimate and destroy all areas of Iran. Paul, those threats from Donald Trump, if there was even an attempt on his life that the US would retaliate with missiles, that leaves a lot of room perhaps for situational misread. And I'm wondering what you feel the risk might be of that threat being on the table.
This is a very serious threat, and it's hard to imagine what President Trump means unless this is at least a veiled reference to the use of nuclear weapons. 1,000 missiles, completely decimating Iran. These are very serious threats, and we can get into the details about whether the U.S. president can issue an order that lives after his death, whether those sorts of things could actually be verified. But this is something that really I think we have to look at as a significant rhetorical escalation, but it's also a very clear deterrent threat. President Trump and his security team clearly feel like there was some credence to the Israeli allegations that the Iranian government or intermediaries of the Iranian government were going to act against Air Force One. That's why they switched the Air Force Ones in Ankara on the way back to the UK and then the USA, because the current Air Force One, the Qatari donated jet, doesn't have all of the security measures that the former 747s do. Now, that's something that says that there's something going on there. On the other hand, they switched a plane. President Trump has issued a threat. What makes this really credible is that there have been reports over the past several years, ever since President Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, that the Iranians were considering something like this in retribution. Now, of course, we're looking at President Trump having ordered the deaths of the entire top echelon of Iran's government, which means that if they're fair play, so too probably is President Trump in Iranians' eyes. So this is something that they have to take seriously. But again, nothing is really happening. We've had relatively targeted airstrikes. American forces are not in a position to invade and hold Kharj Island or Qasem or Bandar Abbas. There simply aren't the sorts of concrete plans that you would look at. And that means that I think this is serious, but it's also aimed at deterring something that hasn't happened yet, where there hasn't even been, to public knowledge, a credible attempt yet. And so I think that this means that there's still lots of room to negotiate, as it looks like people are doing in the background.
All right, Paul Musgrave joining us. Thank you very much.